Okay, so today's class we are going to be trying our best to create SQLite Open Helper class, or SQLite Open Helper class, to help us to be able to get access to our database in our mobile phone. Just so that I can make the screen a bit, okay, have the full screen. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got a class called database helper, and we're going to extend that database helper. If you've done what's it called? You've done object-oriented programming, you would know about extending things to use it to make it into a class like extended parent. So in this case, what we're going to do is our database helper. We're going to have an argument in there, and that's going to be the context. If you remember last week, we had a look at context, right? Where it was this keyword. So in this particular class that we're creating, we're going to have context here, a variable context, because we're going to pass in the context in here. So we have context. Let me see if I can spell it right. Yep. And then we can import class context for now. And then what we're going to do is we are going to extend the SQLite Open Helper because it's already a class. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this into a child class, and this child is going to inherit from the SQLite Open Helper class. So that would help us to get some access to some methods and some functions that we can use in our project. So to extend it, we just have to call SQLite Open Helper. You can see SQLite Open Helper here. And the SQLite Open Helper, it comes with, Open Helper, it takes in some parameters. So some of the parameters it takes in, once you invoke it, you put the circle brackets, it tells you the different kinds of SQLite Open Helper that you can extend with our class. So here we have, the first one is asking for is a context. The second part is asking for is a name, which is the name of our database. The third part of that is asking is factory, SQLite cursor factory, which usually we put the keyword null. And then the last part is we have a database version as well that we can pass in there. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to pass in the first one, which is context. Okay. Let me just put everything on one line because it's quite, so that it's easier for me. Context, we pass in the context. Then we have the database name. Now remember, this is a variable that has not been created yet, so it's going to show up as red because it's a variable that we haven't created yet. And then we are going to have to pass in null, which is the third part. And then the final part is the database version. Okay. Again, we haven't created these yet, so we're expecting to have these kind of errors. So once we've done this, right, what you will find is that the SQLite Open Helper, it had some, because we're inheriting because think of the SQLite Open Helper as a parent class, and we're trying to make this database helper into a child class. So as a result of that, the child has to inherit some things from its parent. Okay, so when you hover over this red squiggly line under database helper, you would have this option there, which says implement members. Okay, so I'm going to click on implement members. Once you click on implement members, it will tell you that we have some abstract classes that we need to implement. Okay, if you click OK, it would create those abstract classes for you. These classes are classes that you need to use. If you don't use this, your Open Helper will not work. It's compulsory classes, okay? Or compulsory methods, should we say. So at this stage, we have our override fun on create. Then we also have our overrun fun on upgrade, okay? We will most likely, we have to create another one, depending on how we're doing it. But what we need to do first is once you implement this on create, and now you implement this on upgrade, first thing we're going to have to do is remember these variables that we have here, the database name and then the database version, right? So this database name and this database version, we haven't created it yet. Okay, so we are going to have to create this also as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, in this code, I am now going to create my something called a companion object. Okay, now a companion object comes along with your class. Okay, it's quite important that we learn to use this, because I mean, some years ago I didn't really use a companion object, but for some reason now, well, Kotlin, when you're on Kotlin documentation, encourages you to use it. And what a companion object is, that if you check for the definition of it, it tells you that it's a special object inside a class that allows you to define some members, okay, such as functions and properties that belong to a class. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some companion objects in here, and that companion object we're going to create is going to contain some members in that particular class. So in our companion object, I'm going to create a companion object, and we're going to create some variables, okay, that's going to help us to be able to build our application. So first of all, I'm going to create database name, because every database has a name, okay, a database name. And for our database name, we are going to call our database name, if we say UserDB, it will not be quite a good name to give it, because the database name is an entire database. It's not just for users, okay? So for my particular purposes, what I like to do is, every time I build projects, I always call the project friendly, okay? So in case any of you decide to steal that name later on in the future, I can sue you. So don't steal the name friendly, okay? It's my personal name I like to use to build my project. So the database name is going to be called friendly DB. Okay, Friendly DB. Friendly was actually one of the first ever websites I created, social media websites I created for myself a while back. When I was in first year, so it's quite a very dear name to me. So we have Friendly DB, right? And then we are going to now create another. Remember, we have database version as well. So we're going to create the database version. Database version is usually the version of the type of database you're using. Now, you increase it as you change your database, as you continue to create new database each time. And then now we move on to now creating. So right now we have our database name. Then we have our database version. So now the next thing that we need is we need to actually give a name to our table. We have to actually create a table, because remember that a database comes along with many tables. Okay, so the first table we're going to create in this case is we're going to create constant val, and then we're going to call it table users equals, and then we're going to call our table. I prefer to usually call my tables some years ago, well, just a couple of 2 years ago, when I started to learn AWS. When you use AWS database, usually when you create a table, because AWS doesn't deal with SQL, it deals with no SQL kind of databases. So when you create like a table, it has the keyword MD to it. So when I create my table, I add the keyword MD to it. It stands for model, I think. So for my table, I'm going to call it, let's say, user MD. Okay, you can call it anything you would like to call it. It's completely up to you. So user MD, or you can call it users table just to make it quite clear for yourself. Then I'm going to have constant val, and I'm going to have column ID. Now, there's a reason why I am creating variables for these things, because we are going to be using the variables at different parts of the project. Okay, so it's quite important that you learn that part. We're going to be using the variables later on. So later on, you will see that when I'm using it, you understand, oh, wow, this is the reason why you created a variable for it. Because we're going to have repetitive use of the same variable, of the same name. So column ID, we're going to call it, it's up to you, but I like to call it user ID as well. And then, but okay, for the purpose of this project, I'll just call it ID, just for now. And then I'm going to have constant val because every table comes along with some names, correct? So we're going to have call name equals, and then we can say, for now, for this purpose of this, just this short tutorial, we can call it name, just so that you have something to work with. Okay, so we've created our database helper, we've implemented some members in here, and then we've given a name to our database name. We've given it, we've assigned an integer to our database version, and then we've got a name for our table called the user MD, and then we have a column ID, and then we also have a column name. Okay, so this is part one of our SQLite database that we're working with.